for everyone who's watching this, I know that some of you may not be into the same type of content, same type of activities. Leo is one of my role models. He's a coach and kind of challenger of himself and of others. And he created a ton of content in forms of articles, videos, online courses, and online communities in which he is allowing others to kind of go above and beyond what they think are their limits. I don't know if I'm selling you short, Leo. Maybe you can add anything to that.
That's great. Yeah, and I think. Well, you know what I do, but my challenge for people is to step into uncertainty, which we normally don't like and we want to like run away from, and really just like play there and find some peace there and not need to run away from it. And in fact, you might even be able to find some joy and openness in the middle of that.
I like that. So let's maybe start with that, because I want to make a little ingression into how I met you, and I met you through your online writing. So I already mentioned on this channel I started experimenting with minimalism and kind of paring down my possessions, and you wrote a lot about that. So yeah. I don't want to go through the very obvious things, because people will Google you unless they know you already, and they will find the stuff and they will find interviews with you where you covered this a lot. So what I'd like to mention is that there is some free content you're providing through ebooks, and one of them that caught my eye, it was called 52 Challenges, which was kind of a cart, like a menu of little challenges that you can apply in your daily life. And I know that you are working on challenges for yourself all the time, even now. So you have a new iteration of that. But I would like you to share a little bit what is the thinking behind, what are these personal challenges, and why even bother, why not to stay, in our comfort? Why should I challenge myself when I'm already doing well?
Yeah, why even bother, right? So you definitely don't have to, right? I remember my life where I was not trying to challenge myself. Once in a while I did, but it was mostly about comfort. So I was eating all kinds of, comfort foods and not being active, and I was procrastinating because I didn't want to do something that was uncomfortable. And it ended up being a really uncomfortable thing for me, is that habit of staying in comfort. So yeah, that was a big shift. Was like, actually, I can't run from discomfort because I'm just creating more of it by adding to my debt and clutter and procrastination. So finally, I decided to face that, and it was the biggest shift in my life. And after like going through that for a year, as you know, I started Zen Habits to share what I've been learning. And challenges have always been one of my favorite tools for that, because yeah, we don't want to face discomfort. And there's a way where we can say, well, I'm just making myself do this thing that I really hate. Why am I going to go out and exercise, or whatever it is we don't want to do? And it just feels terrible. And then at some point we question, like, why am I making myself so miserable? And then we stop. And challenges for me bring an element of play and fun to it, so that it's like, let's see what I can do. And so it becomes more of an adventure, or something that you really like try and step into with just like an attitude of curiosity. And one thing I really love about the word challenge is that it contains one of my favorite things, which is it challenges our current beliefs about ourselves. So we're not just challenging ourselves to be like the superhuman, but we're actually challenging how we see ourselves. And if we have these assumptions like, I can only do things at this level, well, let me challenge that and create a challenge where I actually see as an experiment, can I actually do something different than I think that I can? And so, yeah, I've done so many challenges. I've invited people into challenges every month for the last decade or more. And it's really been this place for people to step in and really experiment. And of course, there's always an element of failure there where we're like, oh, I'm not doing the challenge like I thought I would. And then we beat ourselves up. And then that's another thing to work with. But challenges for me are like really awesome. Oh, the other thing is if I tell people, oh, you should jump in a cold swimming pool every day, they're like, oh, another should. And I stop doing that. But if I challenge people to do it, that you would be surprised at how often people will actually do it. So it's just like this opening, like, okay, it's like almost like inviting them to come on an adventure with you rather than like, let's go out there and do something really hard. It's like, oh, let's go on an adventure. And people all of a sudden get a little bit excited, like, okay, maybe I'll do that. Um, so yeah, that's how I relate to challenges.
That's amazing. I gotta say my relationship with challenge is, I guess, even more complicated because
Hmm.
I'm from Czech Republic, and in my language, the equivalent of the word challenge is mostly associated with something negative. So,
Hmm.
let's challenge ourselves might mean like a buzzword to kind of, kind of code for suffering, if you will.
Oh, wow.
So
What's the Czech word for challenge?
it would be Viswa, probably. It's something like,
Okay.
it's similar. It would be to be dared to do something, I guess.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
it's not negative per se, but very often it's used in the area of enterprises or people management, where the underlying intent is kind of make you do more and pushing the boundaries,
Yeah.
not necessarily for your own sake.
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. Maybe not as much. I'm not sure, but there definitely is an element of that in English. Because when I told people I'm doing a series of 40-day discomfort challenges this year. I got some responses like, "Why are you doing this to yourself? Like, why don't you just like learn to be happy and content?" And there was this like element of like I'm making myself suffer for no reason, just to like maybe stroke my ego or prove something to people. And so yeah, I do think there can be associations of like negative things that people have maybe from growing up or whatever it is that they developed with that word. And I have some of that too, but I don't totally have shifted it. So for me, it's like I love challenges. There's like a relishing of it, you know?
Awesome. I actually want to talk about the shift itself, because I watched, as I said, bunch of interviews where you are providing answers, and it seems to be always covering like multiple flying altitude. And what I
Mm,
mean is you have people who are kind of sold into this idea of, and we're gonna get to how we're gonna call it. I'm gonna call it self-improvement for now.
okay.
You have people who are sold into that, and they are willing to kind of follow you to the ice cold water. And then there are people who don't really know what that weirdo is talking about. So let's kind of define it a little better. Is self-improvement the right word, or is it the challenge? Is it life hacking? Is it, what is it? What are you into? How would you label it for people who don't know anything?
It's a really good question. I think for me, um, it depends on where you are. So if you were Leo starting out back in 2005, when I was just in what I felt like a terrible place in my life and things were really, really tough for me, self-improvement would have been the perfect term, because I did not like myself. I didn't like my life. I didn't like how I was as a father and husband. Um, and so I did feel like self-improvement was something that I would have reached for, and I did. So there was a number of articles and books that I reached for. And so if that feels like a helpful term to you, I say go for it. Like self-improvement, no problem. Like let's work on our habits, let's work on our lives. Um, at another point in your life, you've done that already, right? So you're someone who would be a good example of that. Like you've gone through a number of self-improvement things, and that doesn't mean you're totally happy with who you are or your life exactly, but you have gone through those and you don't need to necessarily be in that, you don't need that word anymore or that term. And so I think at some point it's diving deeper, like what's underneath all of the urges to do self-improvement. So for me, I like to think about just diving deeper into some of this stuff, really going into mastery. And so if I, did some self-improvement to like learn mindfulness and meditate, what would it be like to really dive deeper into meditation and learn mastery with that? If I learned about, compassion or focus or productivity, like what's underlying all of that? So yeah, I don't know the exact wording, but I really love now it's just bringing a curiosity and exploration of stuff and going deeper into it. And there's another part of it. There's always layers, right? Like you said, flying at different altitudes. So there's another layer of it, which is always looking at like what's underneath, what's driving all of that. So like, if I'm eating way too much junk food, great, I can start to change those habits. But what's underneath that? Why am I eating the junk food, right? And it's like, oh, because I'm feeling stressed out and bad about myself. Okay, does the junk food help there? No, it makes me feel more bad about myself. And then we look at that, like, let's just look at you feeling bad about yourself. Like, what's going on there? Or why are you stressed? And what's going on there? And we can go deeper into that. And at some point, it's just a basic uncertainty. It's just a feeling of like shakiness in the world. We're feeling unrooted and groundless. And we're like, I need to like get some kind of solid control over my life. And that's what self-improvement is. And at some point you have some solid control of that, but you still don't feel like you've got ground under your feet. And so you try and find something else. And so there's another phase where you've got some solid habits and you want to just get some real mastery. But there's another phase, which is where you're at right now. And you're there with me, where we are exploring, actually, do I need ground under my feet? Can I just relax in the groundlessness? Do I need control? Can I relax in the fact that this world is chaotic, and be able to like navigate those kinds of like stormy waters without needing to have like safe harbor. And it's it can be a very challenging place, to go back to that word, but it can also be a really, really rewarding place. And that's where I am right now. There's probably more zones beyond that, but I don't know what they are yet.
No, thanks for actually finishing with the word beyond. So I was thinking about this, opening new horizons. Like you reach certain level of progress, understanding, whatever. And I'm kind of trying to avoid certain words that might kind of sound too spiritual, because I want to get into that. But actually,
yeah,
let's get head on. I wanted to tie this into a motive of these Donald Rumsfeld metrics: known, unknown, unknown, unknowns, unknown knowns. I know I sent this to you before the call, but were you familiar with that? Do you remember that from early 2000s? Not saying that
yes.
Donald Rumsfeld is probably not your or my personal hero here, but I find this metrics useful. So just to allude that, I want to talk about known unknowns.
Okay.
A situation when I know there's a skill deficit or knowledge deficit. And I had that with finance, for example, and this is where you started, I'm sure. So you knew there's a problem, you were able to see it. You knew I knew I'm not good with money. I knew there's something to be done, and it was technical. It was, how do I find the tools? But then you are transitioning into the territory of unknown unknowns. Like, for example, thanks to being able to work with you, now I see some gaps that I were not aware are gaps 6 months ago or a year ago. So to phrase it into a question, how do you think about your unknown unknowns now? If you look at the Leo 10 years ago, kind of obese smoker, less sexy, less affluent, and everything. What were the unknowns back then that, over the years, that you opened these horizons for you?
Yeah. Well, I have to confess, I haven't spent too much time like exploring this kind of framework. But I really do love it because it highlights a lot of like, oh, actually I'm focusing on this, but actually there's this whole other area of unknown unknowns. And I actually believe that area is far greater than we could ever know. And I don't think, so there's this is how people work with uncertainty. They want to take that unknown unknowns and move it to the known unknowns, and then eventually move that to the parts that they like have complete mastery and knowledge over. So that's the idea, is like move it to here. So now I can focus on that and learn all about it. And I'm going to get a whole bunch of books and take some courses. And then what happens is you can do that and you'll uncover way more of that. You're like, oh, like there's all kinds of stuff now that I thought I didn't even know that I didn't know. So now it's over here, and that's been uncovered, and you're going to try and move it over there. And it's this constant stream of trying to like uncover what you don't know. That's usually how we'll relate to it. And if you have hit upon something you didn't know, and it's now moved over to here, you'll know it because you're going to start Googling it and start buying a whole bunch of books on it, or taking courses, or just basically trying to like find out everything if you're like me at all. I don't know, that's how I am. I'm like, oh, I learned about this new ancient game of Go. You wouldn't believe how many books I bought on the game of Go. It was like I had stacks of books because I had all of a sudden discovered this thing that I didn't know I didn't know. And I was excited to like move that into the what I do know. And what I found is that the more that I moved through that, the more I realized there was actually way more that I didn't know. And in fact, there's still like that game is so deep that there's no way for me to know everything about it. If I spent my whole life just trying to move that into the known category, there would be no way. And so, and that's just one game, and this universe is infinite. So like, how do we manage that? And so the way that I work with that now is you have to just relax, or I have to relax with the fact that I will never be able to do it. And so just knowing that there's this infinite possibility, that means there's always going to be more like fun stuff to explore and uncover, but I don't have to try and move everything over. I don't know if that's what you're asking about, but that's kind of how I'm relating to it.
Yeah, well, you're totally off, but I'll take it. No, it's pretty much what I'm asking, and I guess it ties into the next question I wanted to ask, and it's a personal for me, since I talked about the like these endeavors and what I'm trying to achieve, and I put some stuff online, and my old friends approached me, and it's like, yeah, what is this about, and what are you doing, and this is kind of weird, and are you gonna throw your stuff away and stuff like that. So I'm wondering, if we use the analogy of the flying altitudes here again, you are trying to reach audience of different types, and speaking to people who are not familiar with these topics is definitely different, because you probably need to adopt a mindset of Leo, I don't know, 8 years ago, versus the audience that spend more time trying to kind of build this muscle. How do you experience this difference in the way you approach people?
The difference between how I approach people like who are kind of at where I was 8 years ago versus
So
Like,
we both know I'll give you an example. So we both know Adam Quine,
mhm.
who was generous enough to kind of had a call with me as well. It might go to YouTube
Oh,
at some
nice.
point, and he had a very nice phrase that he used for that. So he was able in a couple of minutes he was able to assess what is my flying altitude, and he spoke at me, and then he asked me a question. I answered something horrible, like totally off, and he said, so let's lay down some groundwork. And I was like, okay, so thank you, that means I'm totally off topic. So how do you speaking to your old friends, maybe who you know from before you started this work, or
Right.
speaking to friends of your relatives, how do you assess, how do you discern which way to approach the topic? Because you're probably not going to start with talking about Zen and chakras and whatever, or infinite being. And how do you approach this? Is this a better phrasing of a question, or is it just me rambling?
No, it's a good question. And
If it isn't, I
so
can lay down some groundwork for you.
that,
I can lay down some groundwork for you if this is not clear enough.
well, where does the question come from for you? Like are you having difficulties with your friends and relating to them when they're not?
I think it's for me. I would like to bridge the gap a little bit
Mhm.
through showing that based on your flying altitude, there are some differences, but there are also some commonalities. So, is there a common language we can use to convey the importance of it, and to kind of make people glimpse across the horizon, right? And let's say
Got it.
being thirsty for this type of work?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So that I really want to watch Adam's video. He's such a master at this stuff. So I'd love to see how he dealt with it. But for me, the way that I approach it is that there. So I actually just did it with you. Is like wondering what's the pain point that is causing you to ask this question, right? So I started a glimpse, like you're actually wanting to bridge the gap between a number of people who are depending on where they are, but something that a message you could send that actually would appeal at some level to all of them. And that's actually what I'll do is the I'll listen to the question, which is like they're looking for specific information. So people always ask me like, how do you do this? How do you manage your finances? And then I'll ask them like, why are they asking that? And so there's at some point there's a pain or a feeling of uncertainty that causes them to reach out for this information. So if they're going to come to your YouTube channel, for example, or come to my blog, there's a reason they're doing it. They're not just like, maybe they'll be just randomly browsing it, but a lot of times it's like, oh, I really want to simplify my life, right? Well, why? Like, why do you care about? Is it just like it would look really good on Instagram? Maybe that is the pain point. Like, I really want people to think I'm awesome on Instagram. Probably not, though. Most likely, it's like I feel overwhelmed, right? And overwhelm is something that anyone at that level, anyone can relate to that. So these are just human conditions. And so if you're looking at overwhelm or self-doubt or feeling bad about yourself or feeling like you're not on top of things, which is another form of overwhelm. And so there's a set of problems that I've found that like everybody can relate to. They're just human conditions. I'm so frustrated with my partner or with people out there in the world doing things the wrong way. Well, frustration is something anyone can relate to. Now they might not relate to like my budgeting system for finances, but they definitely can feel like, oh, I am way behind on everything, and I'm feeling like there's something wrong with my life. And so that feeling of something being wrong and feeling overwhelmed is totally relatable to anybody. And so I just try and find that commonality and really just speak to that. because yeah, at the tactical level, like not everyone's going to care about those tactics, but if you can reach down to the human level, pretty much everybody can relate to that. Does that answer the question?
I think it does. And speaking of Instagram, I don't know if you remember, but we had this discussion way back about the minimizing or downsizing the possessions, and we discussed whether or not you should show your own apartment as inspiration, like if it's Instagram worthy enough, and this is interesting for me because I think in the early stages and of this whatever self-improvement work, however we want to phrase it, I was definitely looking for the end state, like David Allen, get things done. And by the way, Leo has a book on that. How is it? Zen to done. Zen to done. Which is also cool, and hopefully it's also still available online. And I just see you reaching out mentally to the distant memories of, oh, what did I do? And it's a cool one. But what I want to say is, in the early stages, I'm looking for how do I get from here to someplace else, right? And I'm not comfortable with where I am most of the part. If I'm starting with this, it starts with discomfort. Okay, I'm not happy with my financial situations. I'm not happy with my, with the size of my abs, biceps, or whatever, with my body weight, with my relationship. And I want to be not here. I want to be over there. So I'm looking at the people who got it done. I'm looking at the end state. So to put it in the question, for the people who are starting, you probably as a service provider need to role model the end state. That's what I was looking for. I mean, I was looking for, if he was to provide me services about minimizing, I would look at the Instagram of his apartment.
Sure.
Now I wouldn't. But how do you role model the end state to people who are fixated to the end state, versus still kind of keeping the underlying tone, I would say, quote unquote, for later, that shows that it's about being more content with where you are or with the journey?
That's such a good question.
I decided I'm going to ask you super tough questions you were not asked in the past. So the last one is going to be in Czech.
No, it's a good question, because it actually, definitely touches on the last question, and it might make me actually revise my answer. So I'll admit there was something wrong with that answer. Not wrong, but it's like not quite complete, which is sometimes you have to speak to so look at the person. Well, you have to recognize where they are, right? And we talked about this earlier. So if they're looking to try and get to the end state, I want to have this completely minimalist, beautiful apartment, right? There's a way where I could go deeper with them and ask them, like, why do you care about that? Like, what's the underlying pain point? And then let's start examining your doubts about yourself, right? They don't care about that at that point. They don't want to look at themselves. All they want is this beautiful apartment. And so me trying to dive deeper with them and look at their self-doubts it's not going to be helpful. They'll just be like, there's nothing wrong with, I don't have any self-doubts. All I want is this beautiful apartment. And so that's me trying to dive deeper with them actually wouldn't be helpful. And so I have to look at what actually would serve them. And what would serve them sometimes is talking about the end state and then saying, okay, well, this end state, here are some steps to get started. And all they need are the beginning steps to get started, and they start to move towards it. What they'll find is after they've taken those beginning steps, there's a little bit harder steps. So they start to take those, and at some point they will be ready, because they've gone through a lot of stuff. They'll be ready to dig deeper and like, why do I care about this apartment anyway? Like maybe they actually got the apartment that they were looking for, And they're like, now what? Now I'm going to minimize my computer. Now I'm going to minimize, like, basically you will go on this constant quest for end states, and none of them will actually give you the thing you were looking for. So you start to question, like, what is it that I was actually trying to get? Because I don't feel it right now. You have to go through those a few times. And so you're like, oh, I minimize everything, still feel unsatisfied. Now I'm trying to like find the next, like, how do I travel and have Instagram worthy travel, right? Or whatever it is. I want to be like incredibly productive and focused. And you do that and you're like, I'm so stressed and overwhelmed because I'm churning stuff out all day. But like it's still like I never get happy, right? And so at some point they'll question it. And at that point they're ready. At that point they're ready to like go deeper. So I say like it's totally fine to give them end state stuff, but I really just usually just give them like, okay, I was where you are. I'm here now. Here are the steps that I took in the beginning to move towards it. And that usually is helpful. So yeah, and until it's not. And then at some point they'll be like, okay, this is not, I need more. And then they're willing to go like deeper with you. Yeah.
Thank you, Leo. I didn't think about asking you this, but now I will, because you kind of touched on the topic, and you talked about the steps you took from different stages, and there's a lot of stuff online where you are answering this very question. Okay, so how did I start? But there's not so much around about getting from this intermediate to advanced level, if we can use this term. So how you started, how you plugged the holes, how you fixed the major issues. When did you realize that this is not enough? When was this moment for you when you realized, okay, I'm constantly trying to move from the present someplace else? And what are the steps? What is your flying altitude now? What are the steps you've been taking in the, let's say, last 3, 4, 5 years when you moved from this beginner space into something more?
Yeah. So I'll describe my journey because I think a lot of people will be going through some part of it. So in the beginning, totally felt out of control. I was a procrastinator, wanted to get everything like under control and be really super productive. And so change all my habits, really focused on productivity. And along the way, I also discovered mindfulness and meditation. And at some point, at the end of this beginning part, I realized I wasn't content and that I wanted to be content. So at that point, I started to change. And that was actually around the time that I started Zen Habits. I was writing about all this productivity stuff. And then I was also writing about contentment. And then I was like, wait, these two aren't matching up for me. And so I tried to find a way that you could be productive and content. And so I actually started letting go of a lot of the outcome-based stuff and let go of goals and explored contentment. And then I actually found that to be incredibly helpful, letting go of the outcome stuff. And I was still productive. I still got stuff done because I really loved doing it, but I wasn't trying to like be this end state. And so I actually found contentment. Now, if you've done this already, you'll know like there's a way where you can be content doing anything, anywhere, with anyone, like in any state, right? So you can find contentment, maybe not like 100% content 24 hours a day, but you can find moments of contentment and you're like, oh, okay, this is what contentment is like. And so I find a way to like, it's basically letting go of a lot of expectations and just learning to just really love the moment, right? So if you've done that, you could sit on the couch all day and do nothing and be really happy. You don't have to change a thing. So all of the self-improvement stuff was, you could think of it as wasted activity. I actually think it's necessary to get there, but you will learn that you can actually just do nothing. And I don't need to take on any kind of, goals. I don't have to take on a mission. I don't have to do anything. And so I did that. And then I was like, this is nice. this is nice, but really like it's like sitting on a mountain and not actually doing anything of service to people, which is totally fine. You can be content doing that. You don't need to. And but as I was doing this, I realized actually I've developed some kind of superpower of being able to do all kinds of incredible things. And I could be of service to people, or I could sit here on the couch or in the mountain doing nothing. And I'm like, okay, I could be content with either one. I could be happy doing nothing, and I can be happy helping others. This one actually brings a lot of, benefit to humanity. So why not be content over here doing a bunch of activity? So I actually you don't have to do nothing to be content. And so I said, well, why don't I see what that's like? And so I started challenging myself to step into the uncertainty of like taking on something big. And so I started doing that. That's what I've been doing the last few years, to answer your question, is like, actually, I've just taken on a mission to help millions of people. And I don't know how that's going to be done, but I am clear that I'm committed to that. And I don't need to get there to be content. I'm already content where I am. Not always. I have discontent like anybody else. I'm not a god or anything, but so I don't need that to be content. I can be content right here, but I can also be moving in that direction with commitment, not sure how I'm doing it, and still be content there. And that's where I've been. Does that answer the question?
It does for me. So I'm wondering if it would answer the question for my younger self or not, but I don't know.
Well, going back, so I'd like to go back to touch on something that you said earlier, or you asked about earlier, which was the unknown unknowns. So one thing I did not say there is that framework really, if you reflect on that, really taught me a lot of humility. Might not be too obvious on this video where I'm talking about how much I know, but it taught me how much I don't know, because there were points along this path that I described where someone would tell me something and I'd be like, no, they're totally wrong. And one of them was the person who is now my Zen teacher. And she told me stuff at that point, and I'm like, I'm not interested in any of that. That doesn't make any sense. I don't believe in it. It's all a bunch of bull. I didn't say that to her face, but I was like, well, yeah, that's great, but I want to be more productive. And then she was like, okay, she would just nod her head. Years later, I discovered all the stuff she was saying to me was true. It was in my unknown unknowns. And because I've now moved them into my known unknowns, I can now acknowledge that there was stuff that she was saying to me that I didn't know. And so, yeah, there's going to be lots of times along the way where someone will say stuff to you like what I just said in the last question, and it won't make any sense and it won't like feel right. But I have now opened myself to the possibility that people know stuff that I don't know, and like maybe they're full of it, but maybe there's something there to like question my current beliefs. I found that really useful. So yeah, I've had plenty of people, back then in the first phase of the journey, or even in the second, who will tell me stuff, and I'll be like, I don't need any of that. Like in the second phase, I'd be like, I don't need goals. I don't need any of that stuff. I'm totally content. And they'll be like, yeah, but this or that. And I'm like, I'm not listening to you. And then later I'm like, they were right. I was wrong. So yeah, I don't know if it will appeal to people back, your previous self. What do you think?
I totally get it. So everybody, this is Leo. So a couple of years ago, I would be like, no, this is total bullshit. It's as Leo says. Now I know, I'm so behind. I don't even have a Zen teacher. I need to get like 2 or 3 Zen teachers to catch up.
Oh yeah, that's the phase. That's where you buy a bunch of books. By the way, you mentioned the word chakras. I never use that word, and I still think it's a bunch of bull. But I now admit, maybe I don't know. Maybe there's stuff I don't know there. So that's where I am with chakras.
Perfect. And it's I wonder to this point, we mentioned Zen already. We are getting someplace.
All right.
How are you experiencing the situations when you are approached as the role model or subject matter expert? I don't know how often it happens to you. Maybe you are choosing your relationship in a way that this is not the case. But what I mean is, there are a bunch of jokes about vegans, for example. If you are the one vegan people know, then you are the embodiment of the principle, and you need to defend the entire thing and have tons of reasons. And whenever they catch you that you are just just looking at a hen to eat an egg, and I'm like, oh, come on, you are betraying your principles. Do you feel to be perceived sometimes as a beacon of something? Are people tend to hold you responsible for small lapses? Is this tricky? And how do you approach it? How do you deal with these people? Do you cut them from your life? Do you try to explain? What's your take on that?
That's such a good question. It's so complex. So yes, so people will project stuff onto you, right? And they'll be like, oh, there's the vegan or the minimalist or the Zen guy. It's their own projection. And sometimes it's raising you up, like you're the expert in something. And so sometimes that projection is actually helpful for them, right? And so I realize like I can't actually stop people from doing that. And so sometimes if they think, oh, Leo is the expert at, habits or minimalism or whatever it is, if that helps them to get started, great. I've had that too, where I'm like, oh, this is my Zen teacher. She is this. And so that can be really helpful to kind of, it gives some weight to what they say that helps us to then be motivated to do it, right? We get sold because we can like, oh, they say this is possible, or they say these are the right steps. I'm going to actually like commit to doing that. And so that can be helpful. If without that person, so imagine without this like guru, expert, whatever it is, you're going to be constantly questioning these steps, right? You're like, oh, are these the steps, or are those the steps, or are those the steps? I have no idea. And that's totally fine. You don't have to know what the steps are. You can actually navigate that, but most people won't. They'll just constantly be stuck in not doing anything, or like starting and stopping. And so I'll let them project, right? Like that's fine. The truth is I'm just as messy of a human as anybody else, but you can't really like stop anyone. So they do that, but there's also a way where it's not helpful. And if you are the teacher or a subject matter expert, you have to kind of see when people are doing that. And if you can, shatter that. So there's like, in Zen or in Buddhism, they say like, if you see the Buddha on the road, kill him. So like, that's this like idea that there's like this perfect being or this expert or a guru. And you're not actually going to kill a human being, but you have to kill the image that you have because it's so unhelpful, because you are comparing yourself to this person and you'll never be that perfect image. It's like, oh, no matter how much I simplify my life, I'm never going to be as good as Leo, or as much as I meditate, I'll never be as Zen as Leo. Complete bullshit. I'm as Zen and unzen as anybody else, right? So I have to shatter that for them, or invite them to shatter it for themselves. Yeah, and then there's another way. So let's say that they've shattered it and they're like, okay, he's just a human with all the flaws. So this is the Instagram thing. In the beginning, you might show your perfect apartment, and then you have to start showing the messes, right? And then they're gonna be like, oh, it's okay to like not be perfect. And it's actually, because there's a way where expecting perfection will stop them from actually doing anything. And then, so their second stage is like show messes. And these aren't like linear stages, they're not defined stages, right? But that at some point that can be the place. Then there's a place where they don't they'll treat you as human. So this is where you are with me right now, probably. You've taken me off of the pedestal, which is great. You're like, Leo's just a human, and then whatever I share with you, maybe only, you might like weight it a little bit. Like, okay, he knows a little bit more than my other friend over here, so I'll weight it a little bit more. But I also know he's not perfect, so I'm not going to fully weight it. Right? Totally great. That's where I've been also. And there's another teaching that I found really powerful, which is if you see your teacher, so your Zen teacher, let's say, as a human, you'll be getting like human wisdom from them. If you see them as a Buddha, you'll be getting wisdom from the Buddha. So see your teacher as a Buddha. And the beautiful thing about that is anyone is a Buddha, right? Every single human being is. But if you weight your teacher as like lift them up into something sacred, you are actually receiving this incredible wisdom. And so it becomes this sacred teaching that you can get from this teacher. But you are in control of that. You can decide if you want that to happen or not. And if you want to just have like, just an ordinary conversation with someone, nothing wrong with that. That's amazing. But you can also elevate it and really take that seriously and really contemplate it and look at it as like a possible like sacred teaching, right? So that's where I am right now. I'm exploring that right now. And then they're probably in the next stage where I'm supposed to kill that Buddha, right? So who knows?
No, that's very cool, and you're absolutely right. I don't understand the last stage, and that's probably the origin of my follow up here. So,
okay,
does that mean that on where you are, it doesn't matter who your teacher is if everyone is a Buddha?
Yeah. Yes and no. So there is another instruction, which is see everyone as your teacher, right? And we could be like, well, that Joe Blow down the street is not my teacher. He's totally unenlightened and like totally living exactly the opposite of how I think people should live. Great. How can you learn some lesson from him, right? So he's, in this pandemic, there will be people who walk around without a mask and say, I don't need to wear masks. And if you're a person who believes in masks, you can see that person as your teacher. They're teaching you something about dealing with humanity and learning to like, is there something in this person that you can love? Is there something in this person you can revere and see as sacred? And if not, we're really like discarding a huge amount of humanity because it's like, well, that is total crap, right? And we just judge most of humanity as total crap. So if we judge it as total crap, what if we could actually see something sacred in this person and really see that they're actually teaching us about frustration and how we judge other people? So actually every single human could be your teacher. Everyone you meet can be like, oh, I can elevate them to someone sacred and really like learn something from them. Oh, they're teaching me right now like what it's like to be criticized and how to like let go of all of the pain that I create from being criticized. So yeah, that's how I relate to it. And there's another way where actually I believe my Zen teacher has a little bit more Buddhahood than Joe Blow down the street. So that's probably where I'm making a mistake. But I actually elevate her. I weight her stuff more than the next person. So maybe I don't know if that's true or not. Actually, that question makes me kind of wonder how I'm elevating her above anybody else.
Very good. Yeah, I need to look into that. To budget my time and energy and money in this year to kind of progress. So later on, but offline, of course, I need to ask you, how do I get the most Buddhahood for $1 or something like that? But now I have a last question, and I have to put you on the spot here because I've sent you this question in advance. So you're going to say that's a hard question, but yes, it is. You had a chance to prepare. Okay. And the question is...
prepare, by the way.
Okay. Well, come on. I've been up all night. I've been preparing. No, I'm just lying. Actually, we are in different time zones. So it's evening for me. It's morning for you. So that's kind of... that's very, very deep, profound statement. But the question is, What would be a question that is important, that is, profound, it's meaningful, and you think it should have been asked in these interviews that you're giving, and you are not being asked this question? And of course, I would like you to provide an answer as well. So this is me going to it's evening for me, so I'm lazy at this point. You ask yourself a question and you answer it.
I have to answer it too. Can I ask it of you?
Well, I don't have this Patreon account, where we have your messy self and all these profound questions. So you have to do it for free here.
Okay. Let's see. There's a profound question that I would like to be asked.
It could be impactful. It would be something that usually, maybe goes a little deeper. But you say sometimes is it a question that you think at the end of the interview, hey, Ali should have asked me, or the minimalized should have asked me this and that, and they didn't? Is there a recurring question that that came back after a couple of these interviews? You said, oh, I've never asked this. How interesting.
I was going to say there was a profound question that I would like to be asked, but actually I don't think it's helpful. So I'm going to set that one aside. And there's another thing that I think is profound. I mean,
the profound, I'm going to ask you offline. I'm just saying, now you've staked my interest, but go for it.
The question is, so we talked about these different layers, right? Like I want simplicity. I have self-doubts. I'm uncertain about the world. So if we could go below all of those layers, what is the simple but profound truth that would allow us to navigate these like uncertain waters? So that's the question I actually would love to be asked, and that I think is incredibly helpful if people could learn to work with it. It's not the question people are going to care about if they're looking to have the perfect apartment yet. At some point they will, though. So maybe hearing this will help them too. So
this was the shallow one.
What's that?
This was the shallow one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, this is not shallow at all. It's profound, but it's also not the one that I first came up with. This applies to any situation in our lives, any problem that we're having. So I'm like frustrated with my wife. I'm, like discouraged about my habit change. I'm, mad at some politician. I feel like I can't I can't do all of these changes. I really want this perfect thing, or I can't put my work out into the world because I'm afraid of being judged. So at one level, these are all different problems, right? So we can look at each one and we can tactically solve each one. Below that, though, is each one of those, there's either self-doubt or judgment of someone else, right? So I'm mad at Trump. I don't know if we're allowed to say bad words on your channel, but I'm mad at Trump. I'm mad at my wife. I'm feeling doubt about myself. I'm feeling discouraged, and I'm feeling like not putting stuff out there because I might get judged. And there's, we can name many of them, but all of them have in common, like I have doubts about myself, or I'm judging someone else, right? And then below that, it's just a simple like shakiness about the world and ourselves, right? Which is the same thing. So if I don't want to put my stuff out into the world, I'm feeling shaky about myself, and like, are they going to judge me? Like, will people find this valuable? Or is it going to be embarrassing? Am I going to just totally be like ridiculed, right? That's just a question about whether I can handle people's judgments, because they might judge me. It's a question about whether I will be okay in the world. The same thing as when I judge someone else. Why am I judging them, right? Like, who cares if they're spouting off, crap on Twitter or whatever? I mean, it does have a real impact in some cases, but I'm judging them because like I am uncertain about whether the world is going to be okay and whether I'm going to be okay when the world's not okay. And so there's just this basic level of shakiness. So that's one level. If we can drop below that, that's just the basic level of shakiness that we're all at. That is just a doubt about ourselves and the world being okay, right? So below that, if we could just do it right now, and I invite anyone watching this video to do it right now with me, dropping all of those questions, all of those thoughts, all of these narratives, all of our images about other people or ourselves, below that is just a moment that is full of sensation. So just right now, like if I dropped all of that, all I have is just pure experience, just raw sensory data. And you know, it's just like being out in the uncharted, shaky waters. It's like, actually, there is no problem. You can just navigate this, and you can just be right here in this moment. And the problem is we can't actually just live in that. We have to actually do stuff, right? So, you know, I want to get paid. I need to eat. So I need to like get stuff done and navigate the world at this level. But if you can learn to just relate to this level, there are no problems. All of this stuff is just tactics. It's just like navigation. And in fact, like it doesn't matter if you're feeling doubt about yourself. Like that's just at the basic level, you're just feeling a sensation. It's no problem. And you can actually find a degree of openness at that level. It takes a lot of practice. So I'm not trying to like give you like an easy $1 answer, but if you could just practice there are no problems and you can navigate anything. All of those problems I mentioned go away, and there's like, you know, I've made up something about Trump. I've made up something about my wife. I've made up something about people judging me. And I can just drop down to the level of sensation and like, oh, I'm just feeling uncertain right now. And I can actually just start to like, okay, what do I need to do to navigate this? I don't need to do anything about the Trump situation. I probably do need to talk to my wife. You know, I can put out my work into the world. I can start my habit change again. And even if I feel a little discouraged, I just start again. You know, like there's really simple answers. You know, talking to my wife is just like, oh, let's have a conversation. It's very simple, right? Putting my work out in the world, type a bunch of things, put it out there, or press record, press publish. It's so simple, and we like overthink it and overcomplicate it because of all of this stuff that we're creating. Okay, how did that go? Did you get your money's worth?
Yeah, I believe so, and I believe not just me, but hopefully also my mom and her dog who are going to be watching this later. So thanks.
All right.
Thanks a lot. And
what's your mom's dog's name? What's your mom's dog's name?
It's Ben.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
I really
boring.
Appreciate the opportunity to speak to Ben. Yeah, this is actually one of the highlights of my day. Is like I get to like have a Zen conversation with Ben and your mom. Cool. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, none of them is proficient in English, but I'm sure they appreciate the vibe. And
I hope you have Czech subtitles and dog as well.
Thanks again, Leo. I mean, I was ready for closing remarks, but they would only spoil the moment. So this brought a lot of value to me, and I believe to everyone who was watching this. So I'm looking forward to connect with you again, offline, as we say, which means online. So you give me the really profound question, which I won't be able to understand yet, but I'm going to keep striving for that. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.